Howdy, howdy, howdy. We're talking fractions still, and we're in the second half of our unit. And now we're going to be looking at improper fractions and mixed numbers. And what the heck does that mean? Well, don't worry. We're going to explain it pretty darn quick here. Really quick, though. This document I'm looking at right here, this is the workbooklet you are going to be working through. Okay, so notice it says lesson 6 right there. We'll scroll our way down, and then we have assignment 6. So the assignment is your practice worksheet, essentially. That's what you are going to be assigned, and that's what you're going to be having for homework. The lessons we will go through in class, and if you're not in class, or maybe you just want the refresher, that's why this video exists. We're going to go through the lesson right now in this video. You should be taking notes as you follow through, and that way you have something good to study. Okay, so we do the lesson first, and then we crush the assignment after. Okay, so anyway, let's go through this lesson. And our objective, we are going to model fractions that are equal or greater to 1. Okay, that'll make a bit more sense in a second. So let's go through some terminology really quick. I know we know this because we're pros, but still, we have a fraction. Very top number, that is our numerator. The very bottom number, that is our denominator. Okay, denominator tells us how many parts there are in total, and the numerator is telling us how many we have or how many are being eaten or whatever out of that total. So we would say 3/5. Very cool. Okay, warm up. You'll be able to crush this, no problem. Feel free to pause this video so you can go ahead and do this on your own time just to test your own skills. I'm going to do it in 3, 2, 1. Cool. So 1/2 or 1/2. I can see there's 2 parts total. Okay, 2 parts. Notice that they're pretty close to equal. They should be equal. I need to shade in one of them. 1/2. Cool. 1/3. Okay, so the denominator is telling me there needs to be 3 equal parts. So I'm going to try my very best to make these equal. That's not bad. Pretty darn close. Okay, and then it's 1/3, so I will shade in one of those thirds. Cool. Same thing here, 1/4. Okay. Whenever you have a denominator that's an even number, always start by just cutting it in half. Okay, now I've got halves, but I need 4 parts, or I need quarters. So I'll split those 2 halves I made in half again. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, I've got quarters. And now I better shade in one of them. Cool. Now we're talking fifths. Let's keep going. I need to have 5 equal parts. I might mess this one up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, those aren't great, but they'll do for now. 1/5. Okay, and lastly, 1/10. Again, that's an even denominator, so I'll just cut it in half. And now I have to have 5 parts in each of these halves. So 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, which means there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, not great, but good enough for now. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Cool, 10/10. I only need one shaded in though, because it's 1/10. Boom, there you go. That's what yours should look like on your lesson. Okay, I hope you did it on your own. If you didn't, you need some help. Boom, there it is. That's what it looks like. There you go. So here it says, what is something you noticed about the shaded portions? What happens to them as we change the denominator of the fraction? So notice my orange shaded in here, almost all orange. There we go. Okay. What happens to the shaded in portion? Well, we can see that each portion gets smaller and smaller as our denominators get bigger and bigger, which is why fractions are tricky when you first start learning them. Because when you see 1/10, you think that 1/10 has to be bigger than 1/2. Like there's a 10 in this. It's got to be bigger. But really, we have to understand what fractions are telling us and what the denominator is telling us. So this denominator 10 is telling us it's split up into 10 parts, which means each part has to be smaller. So that's what I hope you're taking away from this, is that the bigger the denominator, the smaller each of those parts has to be. Cool. Moving on. And that's something you probably could have written there, right? Boom, there you go. You can write that down for your own notes. I tried to make it as quick and concise as possible for you. So there you go. Copy that down. I'm going to erase it so I don't forget. All right. Next, fractions are blank of a whole. It is possible to have a fraction that is larger than a whole, or 1. Okay, yes or no? Well, firstly, we have to remember that fractions, they are part of a whole. So you can write that in. Cool. Okay, fractions are parts of wholes. We can see that up here, right? 1/2. We can see the 1/2, just this orange chunk right here. That is just part of a whole strip here. Okay, same for 1/3. That's just one part of this whole. And that's what fractions are. They're parts of wholes, just like decimals, right? 1/2, that's equivalent to 5/10. And 5/10, that's just another part of a whole, different way of representing it. Okay, cool. Let's clear all this off. So anyway, is it possible to have a fraction that is larger than one whole? Now you might be thinking like, well, I don't know, actually, because we just talked about how 1/2, like that's part of a whole. It's less than 1. Is it possible to have a fraction that's greater than that? Well, the answer actually is yes. So make sure you circle that. The answer is yes. And we're going to prove it right now because it says below, draw and use circles to represent 3/2. Well, if I draw one circle here, and my denominator is telling me I got to split it into 2 parts. Okay, cool. Okay, there it is. Denominator told me to split it into 2. I've got 2. Okay, I need to shade in 3. Okay, well, I'll shade in 1 for sure. 1. Okay, 1/2. 2/2. Well, what the heck? What do I do with the 1/3? This is what you do. You draw another circle. Ooh, do a better job than me, though. You got to split it in half. 2 parts, because that denominator is telling me to. Now I can shade in my 1/3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, a bunch of lines in there. Okay, cool. So now I've got 1, 2, 3/2 total. So yes, it is possible to have a fraction that is larger than one whole. I've got one whole here and another half. So in another way, we could write this 3/2. We could say we have 1 whole and 1/2. 1/2. Kind of cool. Moving on. So it says here, when we have a fraction that has a numerator lower than the denominator, the fraction is said to be a proper fraction. So what that means in plain English is something like this: 1/2. Our numerator is smaller than our denominator. We can represent that really quickly. Boom, 1/2, right? This is less than 1 whole, okay? But when we have a fraction that has a numerator larger than a denominator, we call that improper. And here's an example of that. That's an improper fraction, 3/2. It's improper. Numerator is bigger than the denominator. That's an improper fraction. So whenever we're thinking proper, we need to think that this fraction, whatever it is, this proper fraction, it has to be less than 1 whole, which of course is the same as just 1. So proper fractions are less than 1 whole. Whereas an improper fraction, it's going to be greater than 1 whole. Okay, cool. So we got a whole bunch of fractions below us, some proper, some improper. And what does it ask us to do? Well, it says for each fraction below, labeled as proper or improper and represent it as a diagram. I would like you to practice on that. Feel free to pause. I'm going to complete it in 3, 2, 1. Well, I can see numerator is bigger than denominator, so that's got to be improper. And then it wants me to do a diagram. Okay, I can do that. Okay, so halves. I need 5 of them, so okay. There's 1/2. Here's 2/2. Okay, I got to keep going. Make another circle. I got to have 5 halves. Now I've got 3. Now I've got 4. Got to keep going again. My goodness. Cut in half. Cool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 halves. There's an improper fraction. Let's move on. Next one, 1/3. Well, numerator is smaller than denominator, so you betcha that's proper. Let's make thirds. Do the old peace symbol for thirds. Shade in 1 of them. Cool. 1/3. Done. Easy. This one is yet another improper because we can see the numerator is bigger than the denominator. We're talking fourths. I'm going to use a rectangle just because that's a little bit easier for me to draw, I think. Maybe not. We're talking fourths, so I better split it into 4 parts. Okay. Now I need 5 of them shaded in. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, there's 4 to 4. Got to keep going, though. I need 5 fourths or 5 quarters. Notice my shapes. I'm trying my best to make them the same size. They should be the same size. Please try and do that yourself. So anyway, I'm going for 5 quarters. I've only got 4. Got to get my 5th. Cool. And again, if we look just at the diagrams, it's telling us if it's improper or proper. Because here I can see that this is greater than 1. 1 hole, one's filled in, and then I've got another chunk on top of it. Improper. Same thing here. I've got 2 holes shaded in and an extra chunk. Improper. This one, I don't even have a single hole. So that's proper. Okay, really good. Moving on. Let's keep going. 6/5. Yeah, you betcha. Improper. You bet. Okay, I'll use rectangles again because those are fun. Okay, you got to split it into 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. That makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. Cool. And I already know if this is improper, I know I'm going to have to draw a second bar here. Just because I know improper is greater than one hole. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. Cool. That starts from shading. So 6/5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6/5. Boom. Improper. Greater than 1 hole. Awesome. And the last one, yeah, you betcha. It's proper. Numerator is smaller than the denominator. This is definitely going to be less than 1 hole, so I'll only draw 1 shape. 1, 2, 3, 4. My worst diagram yet. Split that in half. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Cool. And 9/10. Yet 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9/10. Close to a hole, but not quite. Awesome. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering like why these are down there, we use these diagrams all the time. We've been using them earlier. So if you wanted to use these hexagon shapes, awesome. If you prefer circles or rectangles like me, awesome. It's all good. Okay, cool. So that being said, you will be asked to use these blocks in some of the questions. So it says choose one type of fraction block. So 1/6, of course, that's our little triangle. 1/3, yep, that's the rhombus or the diamond. 1/2, our half hexagon or a trapezoid. And 1/1 is still represented by our hexagon. So there you go. If you need a reminder, it's up there. And you should still have your own shapes to be using if you need to. Awesome. I hope this helped. Thank you for filling out all these notes on this lesson so you have something good to study. Have fun. Smell you later.